How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another video in our native Android development starter course. So in this video, we're going to be covering a concept called functions. And no matter what programming language you're working in, functions is a fairly important concept because it allows us to reduce the amount of repeated code that we have in our program. So for example, here, I've got a couple lists. I've got a list of names and then a list of years that we have from our previous video. And down below, you can see I've got two for loops that go ahead and loop through each one of those lists. And then after that, print it out to the log. Now, these blocks of code look very, very similar. So what we could do is we could encapsulate one of these inside of a function. And then after that, we can just call that function twice instead of having to write this for loop twice. Now, if you remember in a previous video, I told you that this onCreate block of code, which by the way, fun stands for function. So in our onCreate function block, which is everything from this top yellow curly bracket all the way down to this bottom yellow curly bracket, that's where we were going to be putting all of our code. And that's fine when you're initially messing around and learning some Kotlin. But if you're trying to actually create an app, that's definitely not a good practice. You don't want to put all of your code within a single function here. So we're going to come down below this bottom yellow curly bracket, and we are going to start defining some of our own functions. What we can do here is we can make a function for print list, and then make a little block for that function, which is this top and bottom yellow curly bracket. And then anything we put in between is going to be that function. So if I come up here and I copy that for loop and put it inside the function, now whenever I call this function, it's going to run this code. But we have a problem here. And the problem is you can see our names list is highlighted in red and it says undefined. And the reason that this is undefined, even though we have it right here, is because we defined this variable, this list of names, within this function block, which means it's local to only that function block. So other blocks of code and other functions cannot see, they can't see this variable. So there's a couple things that we could do. We could lift that out of that function and put it up here, which would put it inside the function block for the entire class, or not the function block, it would put that inside the code block for the entire class. You can see from this yellow curly bracket down to the bottom. And now we can do that. You can see names is no longer red, it's purple, it sees it now, and that's gonna work. This is gonna give us a problem though, because I said one thing we wanted to make a function for is to avoid repeatable code. So now we have a function to print a list, but this function is actually only going to print our names list. What if we want to use that function to print our years list? Well, we can't. We would need another function to do that. So I'm going to take that names list and put it back in there. And instead of just using a global variable like that, what we're going to do is we're going to make this function accept an argument. So we're just going to say list. And that list is going to be of type list of strings. And then instead of names, we're going to say list. And instead of name in list, we could do that technically, but that would be confusing when we're running things that aren't names, like our years. So for each item in list, then we're going to go ahead and print that item. So now, whoops, you got to spell them right. So for each item in list, go ahead and print that item. Now, if I come up here and delete these two blocks of code, and I just type print list names, and then print list years, and if I run that code, you can see it prints out my list of names and it prints out all of my entire list of years, which what this has done is now, I mean, with 2, it's not that much repeated code, but let's say I had 5 or 10 or 1,000 different list of things. I don't have to define a print statement or a print loop for each one of those. I can use that same loop over and over again. So within that function, you can see we are accepting one list here. And by the way, if you want to accept more than one parameter, you just divide them by commas. And we could, I don't know, say we could have a tag here, which is a string. And then we could replace that demo with a tag if you wanted to do that. So you just are going to separate all of your parameters by a comma. But also, this function can also pass data back to who's ever calling it. So what we could do here, we could have a function that would, let's say, get square, if we wanted to get the square of a number. And then in there, we'll say number type double. And then here, instead of just jumping right into the block of code like that, what you're going to do is just like to define the data type on a variable, you do a colon and then the data type. It's the same thing with a function. You do a colon and then the data type. So if we get in a double, we want to pass back a double. So whatever comes after these, the parameter parentheses block, so right here, this colon and then the data type, that's going to be whatever data type your function is passing back. So now in here, all we would have to do is say return number multiplied by number, which will give us the square of the number. And we can use that wherever we want to. So if we had another function down here, let's say for the area of a circle, so we get circle area, we would, to determine the area of a circle, that formula is going to be pi r squared, where r is the radius and pi is a constant value. So to do that, we would need one piece of information from who's ever calculating this, and that's just the radius. And then we would need to pass back an area. We'll make that as double as well, so that we can pass back a decimal value. And then inside of this block of code, to get the area of a circle, we need the value of pi. So pi is going to be equal to 3.14159, roughly. That can go on for, I mean, forever, essentially, but we'll just round to that for now. And then in here, what we need to return is pi times, and in here you could do radius times radius, which would give you pi r squared. But actually, because we have this get square function up here that's going to return a double, a cool trick that we can do is we can do pi times, and then we can do get square radius. And because this get square function is returning a double, it's going to, when you get here, it's going to come in here, it's going to take the value of pi, and then it's going to multiply that with the result of this get square function, which is going to be the square of, well, it's going to be radius squared. So this is going to return what we want. If we come up here and we say maybe val area equals, and get circle area, and for a radius of maybe, I don't know, 5.5.0, if we go ahead and run that code now, well, let's put a log statement in here just so that we can see it. Area, well, we'll do it like this. Do area, the area of a circle with a 5.0 radius is, and then in here we can make that $sign area. Let's just put that on 2 lines so that it's easier to read in our log. Now, if we go ahead and run that, you can see we get the area of a circle with a 5.0 radius is 78.53975. So this can be super useful, just being able to put all of this code within a function block that then we can call and run over and over again. So for example, if I just had one area that I was finding, then it's not a big deal just to write that code to find the area. It's not that big of a deal. But if I have a bunch of areas, like if I have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, right, the more of these that you add, the more code that is that you have to write later. So if we have all different radiuses in here, and we want to find the area of all of these circles, with a function, I can do that very easily without having to repeat all of that code. But without a function, I have to repeat writing all of that code over and over and over again. So hopefully you can see how this will drastically reduce the amount of code that we have to write to make pretty much any program. And definitely play around with this, because functions are going to be a very important concept for you to understand and for you to be very, very comfortable working with. So don't just watch this video, play around with it, make different functions for different things, and definitely do all of the homework as well. And hopefully this video is helpful, helps you to understand a function and what that is and how we can use it and how we can both pass data to it and return data from it. And if it does, then definitely like this video and subscribe to our channel. And we will go ahead and see you in the next video.